Incidence. Chapter 3. Cerise. They didn't have far to walk from the landing spot. The wall on their left, speckled with flecks of silver so that it resembled a clear night sky, extended only a few hundred meters before flowing like cloth into an open gate. There was a small back and forth between the two of them on if walking into the town was a safe option, but the indecision boiled down to damned if we do, damned if we don't, with a little interference on the part of the voice to make sure that Chris made the final decision. The town was not crowded. It was, in fact, quite possibly the precise opposite of crowded. The houses resembled cardboard cutouts more than anything substantial, folding in on themselves into a looming cylinder. All style, no substance. A dollhouse with no dolls. "This is a little creepy," Noelle noted with a shiver in her voice. She had a small, brave smile to match Chris's impassive stare forwards, but internally they couldn't help but agree. There are no other presences nearby, which could be a good or a bad thing. Proceed. Chris might have been tempted to let the silence linger, only a few days ago. But some subtle prodding from the voice made them want to do something to fill in the silence. Not even take a backseat perspective to the voice's machinations, but actively attempt to fill the void. They eventually settled on. Frighten her. Oh? Provoke a reaction. The voice's intention was somewhat opaque. You need more information. I am making a conjecture. The voice wasn't certain about something? How excitingly novel. Private admission of weakness is critical for self-improvement. You will do so later. That, at the very least, wouldn't be a new situation for Chris. They waited for the silence to return in full force, for Noelle to become that little bit more anxious. The voice insisted that there wasn't danger, so this would just be like when Chris told her that Ice-E was real and ate kids. Or the time Chris slathered himself in ketchup and pretended to be dying. Or the time they accidentally swapped the animated kids movie they were going to watch with the highest rated thing they could find in Azrael's collection, which turned out to be an animated kids movie with mild horror elements. Just like old times. Do you hear that? They whispered, midway through the climb up the castle stairs. Huh? It sounded like... Chris? Noelle's voice trembled a little. Hear what? They paused dramatically, then took one more step up, hesitant in their every move. I think... at the top of those stairs. Chris, if this is a prank... They took 2 more steps. They were nearly at the top now. What? They mumbled that word, pretending to see something just over the lip of the stairs. Noelle's fur was standing on end. Chris? What is it? They said nothing for a brief moment, dragging the moment out until they would shout dramatically, "Welcome, heroes!" Chris screamed. Noelle screamed. Chris fell backward down the stairs, colliding with Noelle, which in turn created a ball of pain and yet more screaming. A faint cry of confused worry followed the mess down to its inevitable resting spot at the bottom of the ridged ramp. The pile of bodies remained there for about a second before the pair scrambled to separate. Wait! The voice from before, now higher pitched and a little concerned, called down. Heroes! Do not be alarmed. I am not your enemy. Hear it out. Was the voice going insane again? They needed to get out of here. It has made 2 statements. Neither were threatening. It immediately placed itself in a differential position compared to yourself. It is a potential asset. Chris, Noelle hissed. We need to move. Wait, Delta Warriors. I need to tell you. It's a really nice prophecy. There was a brief pause where Chris and Noelle were essentially frozen in place. Please? Chris glanced at Noelle. Noelle glanced back at Chris. She opened her mouth, closed it, and opened it once more. I mean... She gave a sheepish smile. I kind of feel bad now, Chris. Interesting. Noelle being a more decent person than them. News at 8. No. She is happy after being frightened. Chris narrowed their eyes. It is more than relief. You will remember this. It's not like the voice would let them forget. Chris, do you think we should? Yes. Sure. They nodded, slowly. Maybe we can hear whoever it is out. Oh, that's wonderful. The mysterious figure exclaimed from the top of the stairs. There was a moment where nobody moved. Would you, like me to come down or wait up here? Well, Noelle started. Interrupt. It's fine. We can come up. Chris finished, one foot already ahead of the other. The voice nudged them so that it would be awkward for the pair to walk side by side, and as a consequence Noelle was trailing a little behind them during the ascent. The mysterious figure quickly stepped back to allow passage to the wider room ahead, and made the same motion a number of times more so that they could effectively use the space available. The stones here were a moody, unsaturated blue, almost like a worn-out blanket. Given this, the lack of pitch-black darkness was strange. The world itself seemed to maintain some level of light, even without a sun or stars in the sky. Noelle peeked around Chris to get a better look. It was only after a moment of hesitation that the voice had them pace once to the side, so that she could be on a roughly equal footing. The figure, now more clearly masculine, stuttered. So, there was a prophecy? Noelle prompted with an encouraging smile. Yes. He regained his previous confidence, and cleared his throat. Ahem. Once upon a time, a legend was whispered among shadows. The voice chucked a question from Chris's throat. What was the legend? It was... The figure stumbled. That's the point of the prophecy, Chris. He paused. So if you just give me some time... They nodded, and the cloak seemed to relax. Right. It was a legend of hope. It was a legend of light. It was a legend of dark. This is the legend of Deltarune. They paused dramatically, as if there was an inaudible musical backing rising to a crescendo. For millennia, light and dark have lived in balance. There are many measures one could determine this balance by. Most would disagree with the prophet assessment. Chris considered that it was probably a metaphor. Fairy tales have a habit of taking things literally. Do not let fantasy obscure the truth. Ironic, coming from the voice and its manipulations. Her heart pounding. The earth will draw her final breath. Only then, shining with hope, 3 heroes appear at world's edge. A human. The cloak turned, presumably giving a meaningful look at Chris from behind the hood. A monster. And another turn, this time towards Noelle. The figure lingered a bit before continuing, as if confirming something in his mind. Finally, he projected his voice to both of them in twain. And a prince from the dark. Noelle seemed enamored by the act. Chris was less optimistic. Magic or not, a prophecy predicting their arrival seemed a little bit more like wish fulfillment than it did something with the potential to be true. It is a ploy. Unless more information comes to light, this individual is attempting to force you to work towards his goals. Turn it back on him. The voice was likely correct in its deductions, if not necessarily right in its reaction. The cape the stranger was wearing had billowed dramatically for a good few seconds now. But he finally began his monologue once more. Only they can seal the fountains, and banish the angel's heaven. The angel? That crap? Only then will balance be restored, and the world saved from destruction. Today, the fountain of darkness, The geyser that gives this land form stands tall at the center of the kingdom. But recently, another fountain has appeared on the horizon, and with it, the balance of light and dark begins to shift. Noelle was silent, contemplating the implications of such an important prophecy. Chris gave a polite golf clap. Thank you, the figure murmured, a little embarrassed. But heroes, Delta warriors, we have to seal the fountains from the neighbouring lands to save the world from destruction. Chris, Susie, it would be an honour if I could assist you in this task. Susie. Withhold suspicions. Acquire information. I have some questions. Chris spoke. They gently nudged Noelle, giving her a meaningful look as they did so, the voice aiding in projecting an intense message of, "Don't bring it up yet." She tilted her head, but the intent seemed to get through to her. Of course. They could tell the cloaked boy had his hands clasped enthusiastically as he said this. Where did you hear this story? The figure nodded, expecting this. It was foretold across time and space. Oof. Big red flag. I was also wondering something, Noelle piped up. Who are you? The cloak was bobbing up and down gently. I am the prince of this kingdom. Clarify. Pretty sure she meant your name, Chris mentioned offhandedly. Oh. The figure paused. Rouse. That's, embarrassing. Chris felt a shiver down their spine. Clarify. Spelt? Ralsei. The figure spoke, one letter at a time. The room was silent. Noelle had figured it out as well. He knew your name, but had messed up Noelle's. Something has gone wrong with his plan. You need information. Well, I don't suppose we could put a face to that name of yours, Rouse? Chris asked, false cheer helpfully provided by the voice. Oh, of course. The hood Rouse wore was pulled back, and the shawl as a whole fell to the ground, revealing a furred creature in a mint green robe. A vibrant pink scarf and a wide-brimmed wizard's hat concealed his facial features to an unnatural degree, but at the very least Chris could make out his expressions and emotions. And from that, the voice could manipulate much more effectively. Flatter. Huh. Chris mentioned, almost offhandedly. Didn't think you'd look so adorable. Chris, Noelle said, about to scold them. You can't just... She stumbled over the next word, as what Chris said finally caught up in her head. Well, I mean, that's fine to say. There was an awkward pause. Rouse was visibly blushing. I thought they were going to say something else, she murmured, eyes closed and with a small smile. Chris might not have made it out if the voice didn't clarify the words mentally. Thank you. The wizard hat was pulled forward to conceal Rouse's face. So, Chris continued, stony facade uninterrupted by the voice's machinations. You mentioned something about closing a fountain? Right. Rouse straightened up. Chris, Susie, we need to go past the great door and close the fountain of darkness on the horizon. I will teach you both how to deal with conflicts that may arise on the way, but ultimately we must be quick, for the sake of both of our worlds. Chris intoned, at the voice's gentle push. That's the second time you've been talking about someone called Susie. Noelle gave a sidelong glance at how they referred to their classmate. The voice sent some sensations of cleanliness, mixed with memories of folders and files. Information security. But my friend here is called Noelle. They gave a small grin. So either you happen to mishear the abstract concepts of time and space, or they've got something critical wrong. Or Rouse was lying. but bringing that up wouldn't be productive. Rousey looked a little taken aback. He stared at Chris, diverted his attention to Noelle, and just kept looking at her, like she was a puzzle to be solved. Rousey. He looked back. The smile Chris wore was unchanging. I think it wouldn't be unfair to ask how time and space happen to know my name. Noelle's discomfort was eclipsed only by Rousey's mortification. That's not what was supposed to happen. Something's wrong. He began to pace back and forth, and the speed increased over time. This isn't how it was supposed to be. Noelle's brow furrowed. So, I'm not a hero? No, Rousey almost shouted. No? That is, the prophecy was one thing, and then I also knew that I was to meet two of the heroes, and how... Interesting phrasing. You're both the heroes. That can't be wrong. That can't be wrong. He nodded with each time he said it, as if turning locks in his head. The prophecy, at least, is set in stone. Rousey. Noelle offered a warm smile, walking up to the prince. Rousey, it's all going to be okay. Can you take a few deep breaths for me? Recognition. Should they let it happen? Yes. He is more useful when predictable. Chris took the moment to fall back into their head, a third party to their own perspective, letting the scene play out in front of them. Noelle offering comfort and advice, the voice offering colour commentary. They pondered the prophecy. The confidence Rousey felt in it. Even his parts didn't ring quite right. I'm fine. You don't have to worry. I know what you're going through, Rousey. Just take a little time to breathe, okay? Prior attacks. Chris knew that. They knew why. Interesting. Did the voice not? No, please, don't be concerned. Darkness are meant to serve lightness, not the other way around. Very interesting. And concerning. The opposite. This is the perfect environment to achieve your goals. A devoted religious figure in your service. Chris had never been a fan of church. It is a faith diametrically opposed. Your proposed role is to banish the angels' heaven. It is a religion for you. There is no figure above you. There is no path to take, save that which you forge. Chris still didn't want anything to do with it. You want power. I think I'm feeling a little better now. Golly, I'm so sorry for that. I don't know what came over me. It's fine, Rousey. We should really be the ones apologizing. Do that. It would clearly be insincere, but they let the voice say it through them anyway. We're sorry, Rousey. Sincerely, I don't think it had sunk in yet how important this was. I really did want to help. Just... Was that a tear from their eye? Look, I think I can speak on behalf of both of us when I say that getting home is one thing, but something that affects so many people? They gave a resolute nod. Well, never let it be said that I don't have my priorities straight right now. Noelle perked up hesitantly, as if unsure how touchy the subject would be. Speaking of getting home, Chris, Noelle. Rousey had a look of hope so potent that the voice made Chris glance slightly to the side. Thank you. But the only way for you two to get home is by the fountain, by sealing it. That's when you'll be able to return. How convenient. He is not the only one who will achieve his goals. So the voice was in favour of helping out? Cooperation is defined by the alignment of terminal goals along incidental action. Conflict by the existence of such actions that are mutually exclusive. Security is when all actors are incentivized to the former or non-existent. A long-winded way of saying that the voice planned to make Rousey a subordinate. He is too dangerous as an enemy. He is already attempting to place himself under you. Chris had no arguments as to the utility of such a stance. It was the morality that concerned them. It will help you achieve your goals. Well, Noelle's speech was laced with a feeling of acceptance. I guess we don't have much of a choice then, huh, Chris? They nodded one more time, and there was a finality behind it. Seal the Dark Fountain. Save the world. Get back home. The voice pushed their lips slightly into a smirk. All in a day's work, huh? Said like a true hero. Rousey smiled. Internally, Chris winced. The lies that made them seem this way still hurt to tell. You are the hero of your own story. That you are the hero of his is not impossible. Oh, I still haven't taught you how to handle conflicts in this world. Rousey shook his head, embarrassed. Let's head down to the training area. I have a training dummy set up just for you. Sounds good, Noelle chirped. Chris made a noise that sounded vaguely amenable, and took the first steps to lead the group where Rousey's body was facing. They weren't sure exactly how the voice intended to accomplish this when they had no idea where the training area was. People face their bodies towards the primary object of their attention. Rousey's will be the route to your destination. Chris had never noticed that before. Never considered it a possibility. It would have been discerned if you had thought to look. Why is there no one here, anyway? Noelle pondered, the trio having reached the bottom of the steps and gazing out at the town. Well, Rousey looked sheepish. I may be a prince, but I am lacking a little when it comes to... He coughed in his hand. Subjects. Do you intend to acquire any? Chris prompted. I was going to cross that bridge when I came to it, he mumbled. Chris couldn't quite identify what the voice was feeling at that moment, but it was probably some combination of scheming and bloody-minded determination. It's kind of funny, Noelle noted, face falling back into her usual slight smile. It doesn't look abandoned. It's more like it's been prepared in advance. The group continued the walk, and it didn't seem like it was going to stop in town. What exactly is this place, anyway? Not just the town, but the world in general. It's kind of weird, you know? I'm still not completely convinced I'm not dreaming. Well, this is the Dark World, Rousey explained, tone switching subconsciously to a teaching voice. Each Dark World has a dark fountain that sustains it, along with the wishes and desires of the Lightners from outside. The Dark World reflects the Light World, and the Light World reflects it in turn. Of course. There's not exactly a castle in the closet back up in the Light World, Chris said slowly. Maybe it's more metaphorical than that? Noelle suggested. The group exited the town gate and turned left as Rousey replied. I'm not sure of the particulars myself. I learned most of this from the same place I learned the prophecy, and that turned out to be... He glanced down. Unreliable. He perked up at the sight of the area ahead. Ah, the training ground. This is important, so I hope you'll both listen carefully. Noelle and Chris gave signs of affirmation, and they fell into a formation with Rousey without much deliberate input. Stood across from them was a training dummy, stuffed with straw, and wearing the exact same clothes that Rousey had on. Okay, the prince began, robe hiding his hands. He stood still for a moment. Then a moment longer. Normally combat would have started by now. Noelle looked confused. Haven't we already started? Well, Rousey glanced at Chris. Chris, your soul? Soul? Do you mean that in the theological sense, or... They trailed off. Your soul? Rousey tried again. The container of your will and compassion? The fate of the world itself. The way you're describing this makes it seem like a glowing orb is gonna come out of Chris's chest and start moving around, Noelle joked. Rousey looked helpless. Eventually, Chris decided to put him out of his misery. What would normally happen next? Well, the dummy's going to attack you. If your soul gets hurt, then anyone in the party could face the consequences. So, please try your best to dodge the attacks? Rousey phrased this like he was checking if he'd read the lines of a script right. To his credit, the construct on the other end of the field did release a slow storm of projectiles on his mark. Chris felt himself enter into a similar trance to the one back when the goop piles had turned aggressive, where the world seemed to move slower, and the voice spoke deeper into their mind.
Left, right, duck.
Chris dodged the projectiles with relative ease. Noelle laughed good-naturedly. Gosh, Chris, I didn't know you could move like that. Great job, Chris, Rousey cheered. At an almost inaudible whisper that Chris needed the voice's assistance to make out, Rousey continued. That doesn't quite fit, but Noelle's turn to try now, they suggested. I guess I should. She looked a little nervous. It doesn't hurt that much, right? I mean, Rousey looked about to disagree with the idea in the first place, but after a moment's consideration, acquiesced. Yeah. Okay. It's okay if you get hit. I can always heal you. Chris couldn't help but note that Noelle's question hadn't precisely been answered. The dummy, nevertheless, released another barrage, and she prepared to defend herself. She was quick and had an endurance that Chris would have normally lacked, but compared to their movements, hers were noticeably slow and clumsy. Within a few seconds, she had already been clipped on the shoulder and thigh, and by the time the wave had passed, she was visibly wincing. Worry was colouring Chris's face, and, to their slight surprise, Rousey's as well. Don't worry about getting hit, Noelle. He spoke up, cheer injected into his tone. Everyone has to try something for the first time. You did better than I would have done, at least. You said you could heal her? Chris interjected. Yes. Rousey seemed relieved to move on to a safer topic. Magic in this world is based on tension points, or TP. By defending yourself and grazing the enemy's attacks, we can gather this resource and use it for things like healing. Noelle nodded, rubbing her bruises. So, when we fight back against the enemy directly, we want to make sure to hit them head on, so that they can't gain any themselves. Well, Rousey looked unsure. I don't think that should be an issue. How do we know when we have enough to do things individually? The voice was leaking through into Chris's questions now, determined to gather evidence of the magic here. It's, shared, the prince stammered. And you should know instinctively. He paused in a way that suggested he was going to continue, but didn't. So you can heal, Chris suggested. What else can we do when we're especially tense? I can pacify tired enemies, he listed. And Noelle's a monster, so she should be able to cast magic too. Oh, Noelle perked up. What magic can I cast? Rousey began to look like he was experiencing cardiac arrest. Do what feels natural? Chris and Noelle glanced at each other. Okay. She smiled a little awkwardly, but stretched her hands outwards and upwards. The pose was similar to the ones she would have pulled when they were younger, when the pair of them would pretend to be heroes or villains, battling in heated duels against or alongside Azrael in December. A pang of nostalgia wormed its way like a parasite into Chris's chest, and it was only with the voice's aid that they maintained their calm demeanour. Show no weakness except predetermined lies. They blinked. A flash of silvery light sprung from Noelle's hands, and a chill washed over Chris in an invisible wave. Noelle seemed as shocked as they did, but even then the effect of the spell, the magic, was immediately noticeable. Crystalline seeds sprouted on the dummy, dagger-like points emerging gently over the course of a mere second. Then, with a sudden flash and jingle of invisible bells, the crystal sprouted into thick brambles of frost and ice, jagged, cutting, and with a sensation of déjà vu, the statuette of needles became smooth and flawless, the dummy left unchanging. The silence remained for a time. Huh, Chris intoned. Somehow, they managed to sound as if they had just witnessed a particularly impressive golf shot. Seems like you're a natural, Noelle. She stared at her hands, as if unsure what just happened. I guess so. Chris rolled their shoulders a little, the voice beginning an interrogation through them. Can you cast anything else? Any particular feelings when you cast? It was like... She trailed off. Like I was taking what I felt when I was a kid and pushing it into the world. Chris ignored the comments the voice bounced around their head about her mental state. So maybe if you push a different feeling. Noelle looked torn, but took a deep breath after a period of indecision and began the same pose as before. Her face began with some stress lines, but soon relaxed, and a different flash arose. It held the same glistening sheen as the first, but overlain on a deep, dark, verdant green. It burst, and a warm liquid spilled out, jetting straight down towards her. It ran intuitively like a spilt drink, but somehow found its way entirely into the nicks and bruises that had previously peppered Noelle. And then, when the light had faded, she was looking much better for it. Not just physically, but with the warm smile Chris associated with her back in its rightful place of prominence. I can heal, she laughed. I can cast magic and... Gosh, Chris, this is amazing. Chris grinned back, though one eye dutifully kept a watch on Rousey's reaction. Somewhere between relief and concern. Must have been a good feeling then. Noelle gave them a look that made Chris's chest flitter a little. Probably from sympathetic happiness. Yeah. Still from times before, but... yeah. She paused. It's nostalgia, I think. Or remembering what happened in the past. That's magic. Then why didn't Chris?
You do.
Oh. Of course.
Your past was defined by points of certainty in the midst of a hostile world.
And the feelings of emptiness once they were spent.
Her theory holds. She continues to be a valuable ally.
Was Chris really that shallow? To be defined by the outside world, with no exception?
The world is a wave. You were driftwood, sinking. I will make you the ocean. I will help you achieve your goals.
Rousey interrupted the quiet that had overtaken the arena. This might make it a little hard to teach you about attacking, or acting. He scratched his cheek. Or sparing. I guess you could give us a general rundown, Noelle suggested, chuckling a little. Right. The prince took a deep breath. So, for attacking, just make sure you time it right. Attacking shouldn't be necessary in this world, but a little practice can't hurt. Chris nodded in agreement. If we need to get violent, I don't think we can do better than Noelle's spell there. They cracked their neck, focusing on the frozen mannequin. I'll give it my best shot, though. The rush came over them once again, and without thinking, they pulled out an alabaster blade. Before they could ask where in the angel's left tit they had acquired it, the voice was already puppeteering them more directly towards the enemy. A burst of mixed memories moved their arms, and a crack drove its way straight from one side to the other of the structure. The sword morphed into a shield with a hazy spin, as Chris's mind tilted to sheltering themselves from the outpouring of ice. A quick leap back, the shield winding itself down into a non-existent pocket, and the voice released them. They couldn't sag from the exertion, but they damn well felt inclined to. Seems like you're a natural, Chris, mentioned Noelle, humorously. There's another thing they should be a natural at as well, Rousey piped up.
They seemed somewhat enthused with how the display had been, but Chris couldn't put a finger on the pattern of what made them panicked, or not just yet.
Take charge. The potential information gain is minimal.
We should probably be on the move, though, Chris hummed. Fountain isn't going to seal itself, after all.
Noelle nodded.
Chris has a point. You can always teach us while we're walking, Rouse.
The prince gave a glance towards the doll, now frozen and bisected.
I guess we weren't going to get much more out of this anyway, he mumbled. Great, Chris said, confidence in their tone. You said the fountain was to the east, Rouse? Let's head there then. The voice helped them use the same trick from before, heading to where Rouse wanted to go without his express instructions. They glanced at another point of magic a short time after they left, Rouse and Noelle following close behind them. The voice extended their fingers to barely brush it, and though the feeling of power once more echoed through their veins, Rouse and Noelle seemed not to recognize it. The lack of healing, they considered, probably made it unnoticeable. Eventually, another dead end blocked their path. A large gateway, blocked with a desaturated purple stone slab, engraved with markings and symbology, took up their vision. It was unbent and unbroken. Rouse stepped past them. The great door, he hummed. The darkener looked almost at peace. Finally, it's time to open it. He glanced back. Chris. Noelle. Heroes. This is the beginning of a long journey, but I want you to know that I believe in you. I believe that we can restore the balance between light and dark. Though his facial features were obscured, Chris could still make out a small, happy expression on his face. Are you truly ready? Noelle looked at Chris for instruction, and the voice was pleased. It didn't have to tell them what to do, because there was only one answer that would be right. Yes. Yes, we are. Rouse nodded. Then let's begin. He began to glow, and that glow infused the door with striking rapidity. A bright light crawled its way down the seam in the middle, and the door opened to reveal a striking field of reds and purples. Dozens of figures, noticeably distinct from any monsters that Chris had ever seen before, crowded just outside. It's the Lightners, one shouted. Get the betrayers! Wait, Rouse questioned, puzzlement warping his peaceful expression. What? Hundreds of glowing bullets, jagged and round, direct and unwieldy, were launched en masse towards the trio. Chris raised their shield, but could do nothing but witness the brutal laceration of their companions, and the inevitable welling of blood on their exposed back and sides. A despair rippled through them as they fell back onto the paving stones. Their vision blurred, and the voice became faint, their muscles and nerves torn apart from the bone. The last thing they saw, and the last thing they wondered, was why the dark fountain in the distance glowed an impossible shade of yellow.